Good evening. I'd like to call the Building Board of Appeals meeting to order. The meeting is October 18th, 2017. I'm going to ask the co-chair to take attendance.
Okay. You have a list. Okay. So Jeff is here. I'm sorry, what's your name?
Donna Flaherty?
Donna?
Donna.
Ron Mansky is absent. Dave Mitchell is here. Anne Marie is absent. Dustin is absent. And we have joining us tonight Steve Kemp, the city attorney, and Bill Tracy, chief building official, also known as CBO. Okay, the first thing is to introduce Bill Tracy. Bill Tracy was interviewed along with two other candidates, and they were strong. All three candidates were strong. I was one of the 8 that interviewed the candidates. We had 2 interviews. He was in Williston, and he was strong enough that the city paid for him to come down so that the second interview was in person.
So just for the record, we do not have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Which is okay because we're not going to have any items to vote on. It's a study session. Bill's lived in New Hampshire and most recently North Dakota, and he decided to move to tropics. He is a former resident of Littleton. He went to Littleton High School. He graduated from Arapahoe Community College. And he was a unanimous pick of the 3 candidates, and they were all strong. Bill Tracy, welcome.
Thank
you. The other item tonight, and the meeting will be fairly short, is gutters. And we briefly discussed this at the last study session. I will again review, because it wasn't recorded, my experience. I had roof and gutters replaced in my house a couple of years ago, and the following problem came to light. When they were tearing off the roof and the gutters, some of my fascia went with the gutters. My house is 57 years old, at the time it was 55 years old, and so I'm sure over a period of 55 years some water got behind things and some dry rot and so on. So it became clear to me that I had fascia, that some of which was gone at that point, some of which looked good, but probably not particularly secure. So we had, I will put it politely, discussions with the roofer gutter about attaching the gutters, and they were used to and wanted to attach it to the fascia, and I said that wouldn't be acceptable, and we finally agreed that they would attach it to the joist ends, or if more modern construction, to the truss system. So I've talked to a couple, 3 builders, and they acknowledged that this was a problem. In the city, and many cities don't inspect gutters; they inspect the roof. And I'm proposing that they inspect gutters when they inspect the roof, because they're already there. I'm not sure that we want to add gutter inspection if just gutters are done, but I'm going to let Bill address that situation. But certainly, I think. So we were talking about seeing if the board agreed, and if so, then we proposed to City Council an amendment to the code. Bill's done some research, and I'll let him take over.
Yes, so there's a section in the code in the IRC that directly references expansive soils, and it talks about guttering and diverting water 5 feet away from the foundation. So we feel administratively, given propensity of expansive soils that we have in Littleton, that we can require guttering on homes here, new construction, additions, etc. Should the board feel directionally that's something that we should undertake. In regard to the inspection for the roofing replacement of your shingles, that's easily implemented in our inspection process, that when they go for the final inspection for the shingles and they're checking, you know, the boots on the vent pipes as they come out, the V-vents and things of that nature, that the gutters are properly attached back on the house. So we don't feel that we need to have an amendment. We feel that the code gives us the administrative authority that we can implement that as part of our inspection.
And how will you define attachment? Will you define it as a joist end or truss system, or how will you define what's your idea of adequate attachment?
I feel that obviously the attachment needs to be to something that's structurally sound. Now, in regard to the fascia board, there's varying thicknesses of fascia board. A 3/4 inch, say a 1x6 for example, we would expect that either the gutter is strapped up underneath the shingle to the sheathing, or that it's attached to a truss end or rafter tail, and just not directly to the mid-span of the fascia board if it's 3/4 inch. If it's 1.5 inches, the 1.5 inches is structurally sound, then that attachment would be fine.
Okay. And you're going to do that fairly soon?
Yes.
Okay, good. So that satisfies my concern without going through the city council and so on. Any comments from the?
Dave, since you recently just had this priced out, what was the price increase from just throwing it on the fascia versus?
There's none.
Okay.
If it's strapped to the roof, it's not an issue because you've got new decking, or at least decking that's been inspected. If it's a bracket, you screw the bracket into the fascia, and you screw the bracket into the rafter tail. It's just it takes the gutter guy 13 seconds, to find the rafter tail, but that's almost always obvious, certainly with a magnet, but certainly is typically visible because it's been nailed or screwed, during the construction, which 10 or 15 years ago. So it's, they'll complain because they like to just go zap, 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 but in reality, the cost is...
No materials, a little care.
Correct. Okay. And it is possible that if a gutter guy knew ahead of time that he's going to have to do it to something that's structurally sound, he might say, I'm going to charge an extra $20 because I've got to search for, but it's minimal at most. Correct?
That would be correct. The only drawback from a cost standpoint would be, let's say for example, the fascia board is rotted completely. Then they may not want to warrant the installation into the rafter tail specifically because the board that covers the rafter tail of a truss is not structurally sound. So you may incur the cost of maybe replacing the fascia board.
But that's sort of covered under workmanlike manner kind of construction, isn't it?
Good craftsmanship.
Are you proposing this just for new construction or repair?
No, actually, yeah, I think I'm going to guess new construction, but more likely the issue would be with a re-roof house that exists,
right?
Where there's been the opportunity for the fascia board to become unsound.
Right. Okay.
It can still be there, but it's not. It's marginal.
I'm getting out of this is that in the future, anytime we do, when there's a roof inspection that needs to be completed, when the shingles are on, the gutter inspection will also come, regardless of whether it's new or previous
Yes,
construction.
ma'am.
Okay.
If it's existing, then they'll just ensure that it was reinstalled properly.
Right.
Yes, ma'am.
Since they're not redoing the roof, how would you,
I don't know, how would you handle it if,
they're just replacing the gutters?
is there a permit pulled for just replacing the gutters?
No.
So there's no inspection?
Okay.
But when you're doing a roof, you're already there.
Right.
So there is that uncovered area.
Right.
And the only reason that I caught it was I'm at home, I'm retired, I'm there. So I saw what was going on. But anybody that's working, they're off at work and they have no idea, what kinds of things went on that weren't right because they weren't there. So that's, in most cases, it wouldn't be discovered. Okay. Staff's not here. Well, Bill's here. Do you have any comments, Bill, besides what we've talked about?
Sir.
Steve, do you have any comments?
I can simply note on building code amendments, the International Building Code Council will be releasing at some point very soon the 2018 international codes. This city has usually anywhere from 6 to 9 years. It adopted the 2003 codes, it adopted the 2012 codes. Once those are released, one of the first things we'll be doing is checking with our adjacent communities. Various communities try to stay sort of with the same uniform codes. Now, there are always outliers who don't keep up, but from our standpoint, it is important for us to know what is Aurora doing, what's Lone Tree doing, what's Centennial doing, what are the counties doing. And so the first step as those codes are released is we'll be networking with the adjacent communities on what their intents are. Most of the communities around here have been using the 2012 code, so my guess is we'll find as we network with those communities that probably everybody will be in line to look at the 2018 codes. After we sort of do that and we look at the 2018 codes, then we'll be bringing them to you and talking with you about them in greater detail. So we're right now, and most of that gets done initially by the chief building official. If he needs our assistance, he'll work with us, but we'll sort of work with him as necessary on that process. So we'll keep you advised as to what is happening with that.
In previous discussions have been around, does the city, does the board want to adopt each code as it changes every 3 years, or do we want to go 6 years? And I think the consensus, at least at that point, we certainly may want to change, but it was kind of game day decision. Is there significant changes in the code that we should? Maybe it's been 3 years, and maybe we should take a hard look at the changes. And if there's nothing significant, then we don't. And the reason that we wouldn't is that it requires a great deal of staff time, does it not?
It does.
And a good example, if you look at jurisdictions, the 1991 Uniform Building Code, the predecessor to the International Codes, was a significant change from the 1988 code. Most jurisdictions adopted that code. 1994 Uniform Building Code was a very minor change. Very few jurisdictions adopted that code. And in fact, many jurisdictions waited till the first international code came out in the late 90s. So at this point, the 2015, we certainly don't see any reason to consider that. And so we'll be waiting for the 2018 and then starting that networking process and seeing how all of the communities in the metro area are going to be approaching this. And then based on that, we'll be keeping you up to date. And then we'll be also after that, assuming that we would recommend that, we then start looking at what kinds of local amendments, because these international codes are obviously written for the whole United States, Canada, Mexico, and most of the world. And so there are things in them that when we, as Bill can tell you, when we look at them and say, does that work in the Denver metro area? The answer is no. And so that's where we look at local amendments is where there's things in the code, just like when I was in Phoenix, there were things that didn't work in a desert climate, and that's just the way it is.
You don't worry about snow in Phoenix?
No, we don't worry about snow. We have to worry, we just go up to Flagstaff, look at it, and we would say, oh, that's snow, and turn around and drive the other way, and that was the end of it.
And I will share with you that I have heard several comments from staff that in a short period of time that Bill's been here, there have been significant changes and improvements. This is the first time really that the city has had what I consider a strong CBO. So it's a welcome addition for the benefit of the city of Littleton. Anybody else have any comments? We're going to adjourn the study session. Thank you.
I think we're adjourned. Thank you.